Welcome to LCRL's Liberty Alert in Washington, D.C. with your host, Dr. Gregory Seltz. Talking two kingdom citizenship, bold biblical principles for a robust public Christian life. And now, your host, Dr. Gregory Seltz.
Hello, my name is Dr. Gregory Seltz. Welcome to LCRL's Liberty Alert. It's our weekly foray into living as two kingdom citizens in the world today for the sake of the culture and the mission of the church. We do have a citizenship, discipleship witness to get after. One of the issues we will be talking about is a lot this fall is going to be the sanctity of life and our role in being useful to God and bringing about a kind of sacred view of all life back into our culture. And I was at the ADF Pro-Life Summit this past week, and the coming opportunities for the new year. It's going to be a special year in 2022. I do believe it's going to be a real game changer for our culture. So we'll talk about that coming up soon. Just want to say thanks again very much for your prayerful support. If you want to donate to our LCRL, you can go to lcrlfreedom.org. That's lcrlfreedom.org, and just you see the donate button there, and you can press that. We sure appreciate all of your prayers, all of your support, because we've got work to do for the sake of our church and our culture. So we've got a citizenship, a discipleship witness to get after, and part of getting after that is to attend to some of the celebrations in life that make life worth living, and even this work worth doing. And so today, what I want to talk to you all about is this is the Birnnaversary Program. And what I mean by, we'll get to that in a minute, but it's a reminder to focus on faith and family and friends and community in that order. And when you must, last, government. I'm going to talk about the Birnnaversary. It's a reminder of what matters in the Seltz Household. We're talking about faith and family first. It's the way that God orders, his moral and gospel agency to live life to its fullest. And then even talking about why our faith and family traditions matter, because they remind us what is most important of all. So today it's the Birnnaversary time in the Seltz Household, a reminder of what matters. And I hope a little bit of fun for you today. Let me just start off by saying, do you remember that Nicolas Cage movie back in the day called The Family Man? Not going to get into the detail of that. It's kind of a what if type movie, if you'd have chosen this way or chosen that way. But right in one of the scenes where, he wakes up in kind of an alternate life, if you will, his daughter reminds him that it's the anniversary, and he always is supposed to do something crazy on the anniversary. And of course, Nicolas Cage doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, I love watching that movie with my wife and later with our daughter. And every year we have a lot of fun celebrating in our household the Birnnaversary. And the Birnnaversary is, our wedding anniversary, which was yesterday, and Yvette's birthday, which is today. It's one of those cool things where, as a husband, I either, if I get it wrong, I get it all wrong. If you miss the anniversary and the birthday, oh my goodness. But I never forget, because they always come together. And so we put it together and called it the Birnnaversary, the birthday and anniversary. And we really try to do something special on each day. But, it reminded me when I started thinking about my work in Washington, things like anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, holy days, family traditions, they matter because they remind us of what is most important in our life. And when I talk about our work in DC, I want to make sure you always know the difference between, your benevolent family, your benevolent church, and the not so benevolent, and it shouldn't be benevolent government. And why faith and family and friends are first in order of importance and commitment, and why other things follow, not lead. When you're looking elsewhere from faith and family to something like government or public programs, as it should only be a last resort and never a long-term solution. God puts us in those relationships relationship with him and a relationship with our family, a relationship with friends. And those are the things that really, really matter. And so the Birnnaversary reminds me of that order for a reason, and that order every season. Now, if you don't have that order in mind, and there's a lot of people, it's amazing to me, there's a lot of people who are looking elsewhere for purpose and meaning. In fact, there are people who are at war with family. They're at war with marriage. I even think the gay marriage issue, if we got into all that stuff, that's really just the last stake in the heart of marriage in our society, because that's really, we've reduced marriage to nothing more than a relationship and a moment in time. But if you don't see faith and family first as the key to it all, I think you're going to find out that everything else is going to let you down tremendously. We just saw that in some of the stuff that's going on in our culture at this time. Whatever you think of the politics of the Afghanistan situation, one thing is clear: the government does not care about you in the way that your family can. I mean, when you start to think about what's happening and the craziness that's happening, and watching these politicians fall all over themselves to blame somebody else, and not really, I mean, if that were your son, your daughter, your father, your mother behind enemy lines, how would you go about getting them out if you had the means and the opportunity? It'd be a whole lot different than some government bureaucrat. And that's one of the things that's so crazy today. We're in a lot of our policies, we're giving our children over to the government. We're giving our children over to state-run daycare. We're giving our families over to this. We're giving our lives to our businesses, or our lives to our work, not to our wives and to our husbands and to our children, and then to our faith family at the church. And that's what I'm saying, that the order is important. And then even just thinking about, you think about, well, maybe if government's closer to us, they'll care about us the way a family cares about us. Well, I just came across some information that local governments in Illinois, they just decertified 2 LCMS schools. I'm going to find out more about that. I'll be reporting on that in the next couple of days. And they're not going to let the children play sports with any other schools. Why did they come out like this? Because they actually voted as a congregation, as a school, not to mandate masks for the sake of the children. Masks for the sake of the children. The science says these kids are not as vulnerable to this disease, never have been. We know that the masks do not do the kind of thing that they're kind of a placebo kind of thing anyway. And this church, they got together, and in freedom, they decided not to mandate. You could still do it if you want, but not to mandate. And the state decertified them. It took away its accreditation. Man, that's crazy. The kind of like heavy hand of the state to do whatever it pleases without any rhyme or reason. We're seeing that they don't care about that school. They don't care about those children. The parents care about their kids way more than some bureaucrat. And they realize that masks are really detrimental to their children at this stage, based on what the science is, and how punitive this variant is. It's more contagious, but it's a lot less problematic. And it's just, again, it's crazy. But that just shows you again that your family cares way more about you. And then I thought of a story of a young girl that back in the day when I was a pastor, and I'm not going to say what church or anything, but I just remember a father calling me. He was overseas on a trip, and he called me in the middle of the night to go get his daughter, because his daughter was walking along some major thoroughfare where we were serving. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, what the heck? And he said, because she had left home and she was living with friends, and she thought the friends cared more about her. Well, they had gotten tired of her, and they kicked her out in the middle of the night, and they could have cared less what happened to her. And yet there was mom and dad even then, and he was out of the country. And he said, Pastor, will you go get her? Again, so, when we start, things like the Birnnaversary start to remind me, man, that's why it's important to put government in its place, and to put family in its place, and to put moms and dads and their authority for their children in its proper place, and to put religious liberty in its place, so that free people acting with virtue and acting in freedom can solve their own problems. And so much of what we're fighting for today is, I think, is just to keep the government out of the business of family, schools, and faith, because they're the first line of civility, humanity, love, and purpose. So, again, I ran across some articles. I was thinking about celebrating the Birnnaversary, and I heard the Speaker of the House say that her party was the Matthew 25 caucus, and that she let prisoners go free because the Bible told her so. And I said, man, what is she doing the work of the church and getting involved in the business of the family? Her job is supposed to just be like the referee. And yet she's making all kinds of rules for us as if she's fulfilling Matthew 25 itself, which is actually supposed to be fulfilled by individuals freely loving others, not coercive government doing it for us. So faith and family first. It's the way of God's moral gospel agency to live life to its fullest. I guess a couple of quotes here again on the Birnnaversary celebration program. I love what Winston Churchill said. He said, "There's no doubt that it is around the family and the home that all the greatest virtues, the most dominating virtues of human society are created, strengthened, and maintained." I think he's right. And that's what we're celebrating on our weekend when we look back at all the years we've been together. And then Mother Teresa said, "What can you do to promote world peace? Go home and love your family." One of the reasons that family matters first is because it's the first place that you learn about moral agency, like that you have a responsibility and commitment in the context of love. And this is where you start to realize that love is not just merely being accepted. It's a willingness to also be challenged, to be disciplined, and to be expected to grow up into the adult, from a child to adult that you were meant to be. And I think this is what happens when you're connected to and extended from your family. You have an identity that comes from being born into a family, and then that identity is extended, but it's also transformed in the fact that you become your own person going forward, but you become an adult, and then you also come together in marriage and you build a family and you extend those virtues and you extend faith and you do all those kinds of things. And all this happens when you have and try to raise up children into adults who can also extend values that make life worth living and families worth having. And so again, that happens when faith and family come first in one's life, not careers, not social standing, not personal power, and sure not government edict. And as I said before, the government is taking the place for many people for the sake of their meaning, their purpose, their life, their stature. In many ways, it's trying to do the work of the church. And in a lot of ways, it's starting to do the work of the family. It's the parental responsibility to educate and to raise up our children in virtue, not the school board. If we do give them authority to do that, it is a derived authority, one that has to serve ultimately the virtue and the needs of the people who give them that authority. And so again, this moral agency and personal responsibility for one's life before God, and the first place you practice that is in your family. And a society grows up when healthy families are doing their job. A civil society extends from that kind of thing. So listen, when people don't have a sense of their own moral agency within their family or a responsibility to something higher than themselves, there can be no inner satisfaction and there can be no benevolence. I was thinking about this. We have so many people think the solution to all our problems today, they don't think about the family, they don't think about the church. They just think we got to do things for people. So people, if we give them a job or we give them money, or we give them stuff, then it'll all just magically work out. Well, if you don't feel a responsibility, if you don't have a sense of moral agency, where you're trying to actually do things on your own and become the man or woman you were called to be, if you don't feel that, if you don't have that sense of responsibility and that sense of moral agency, benevolence will never be able to help you. In fact, benevolence can't happen because it wouldn't be benevolence then if you thought that you deserved it. I always remember that example of that guy that, he passed this guy sitting on the porch every day, and after a while, he started to give him $10, and he did it 5 days in a row. And on the sixth day, when he's passing by the guy on the porch, he didn't give him anything. And as he kept on walking, the guy yelled at him, "Hey, where's my $10?" Well, if he didn't think that he didn't deserve it, then it wasn't benevolence. The first day, I think he probably did. But again, that sense of entitlement, that when you're just given to something, when you don't feel any moral agency, you don't feel any responsibility, if you think someone else is supposed to do for you, it quickly devolves into selfishness and covetousness and all those things. And one of the places where we learn about that moral agency is in our families. We have a responsibility to the family. So the healthy understanding of oneself is because of your commitments, not your desires. And that starts with being a part of the faith family, part of being a part of a family. And as I'm reminded on the Birnnaversary, it's that understanding of oneself is actually something that happens when you learn to give yourself away as a husband or as a wife, and then when you learn to give yourself away as a father or a mother when you have children. I guess that's what's so troubling. I read a couple of articles this week. So many of our debates so many of the problems we're dealing with are because of the dissolution of the family. And there are people who want to see this happen. I just read an article by Albert Mohler, and he said, "Is marriage just a sexist institution?" And he's quoting some article, I think that was in the Atlantic, where basically they're saying, men are superfluous. We don't need families. Families are an archaic institution. Of course, they're saying it's some kind of a patriarchal thing that only grew up in the last 100 years or 200 years. In reality, it's an extension of what it means to be male and female. And so when you look at the biblical notion of family, this goes back millennia. And people today are actually saying it's an obstacle to the sexual revolution, and we've got to disband it. That's why I'm so suspect about even the whole gay marriage movement. I think it was just the final phase of saying marriage as an institution doesn't matter. Because marriage is more than just personal love. Marriage is a commitment to learn to love. Marriage is a commitment to actually be willing to learn to love another person throughout all the different stages of their life. And there's going to be ups and downs in that. And so again, when you look at this kind of stuff, it's so troubling to see that instead of people trying to figure out ways to be more faithful in marriage and more committed to marriage, we're actually talking about dissolving it and getting rid of it. And so when you start to see this most basic institution under attack, you see the devolution of society. That's why you see increasing violence and callousness and coarseness and the loss of family values, because people don't even have a commitment to their own, let alone others. And like I said, and when you start to think, my government official will love me as much as my dad, it's just not true. And we need to find ways to encourage moms and dads to stay together and to build families, because that's where the first line of civility, humanity, and society is built. So, where are you going to find purpose and value and commitment and intimacy and love? At your job? In your government program with all of your degrees, with your pension on the golf course, in unlimited travel? No, faith, family, and friends. You put those things first, and all these other things find their proper place, right? So again, that's one of the reasons why we talk about, the distinction or the differentiation between church and state. And when we mean by church, we think of all those things that are freely given and freely received and freely given, whereas the state is all about coercion. And about, they're, like I said, they should be the referees, but they should treat everybody playing the game the same. And that's why the constitutional limitations of government are so beautiful. And that's one of the reasons why the First Amendment is so incredible. Faith and family and community, if those things are first, then religious liberty matters, because that's what protects faith, family, and community first from the kind of government intrusion that can destroy that. And we're seeing that. We had a protest the other day in front of the Finnish consulate, and I got a chance to speak to the communications director of the Finnish consulate, and we're protesting the fact that a pastor and a government official are literally going on trial. Well, they've actually been arrested, and they're going to be going on trial, and they violated this thing called the ethnic agitation law. But what exactly does that mean? Well, they teach that they teach the Bible's view of marriage between a man and a woman for life, and they also teach the Bible's view of sex as something that is to be reserved and practiced and enjoyed in the committed relationship between a man and a woman. They teach that. That's what the Bible teaches. And for that, you can disagree with that view of life, but for that, they are being charged with ethnic agitation. I don't understand how people who practice different sexual practices are an ethnicity, but that's a whole nother discussion. But they literally can be put in jail for up to 2 years. And they can be bankrupted by the state. They've already been interviewed multiple times. One of the things that I put this video on our website. Päivi Räsänen, who is the minister president, the government official, she finally said, well, what are you going to do with the Bible then? Are you going to take the Bible out of our society? And they said, no, we'll leave the Bible in the libraries and things. And she said, well, how can you do that? Because it teaches these things. And they said, well, you can read it, but you just can't believe it. What? A government telling you can read the Bible, but if you believe it, we're going to put you in jail. I call it secular blasphemy laws, and folks, they're coming here if we don't watch it. If we don't start to get back to faith, family, and community first, and realize that the government actually doesn't want to do those things, our culture is going to be going down into some of these similar things as well. I always try to tell people, we're not the ones who are politicizing these issues. We're the ones on the defensive. We just want to talk about boys and girls and moms and dads, and that is even being eliminated by Foucaultian wordsmiths, to the degradation of our children, to the infantilization, adults never growing up, to the dependence on others for value and worth, and to the loss of faith in ourselves and in our families and in the God who created and redeemed us. This is a spiritual thing that's happening, and it's because government is getting in and saying, we're going to take over these areas. And the government has no right to be in the area of the heart. It has no right to be in the area of conscience. And it's not the one that's supposed to play the game of our life for the sake of our life. They don't determine how our lives come out in the end. Their job is to make sure that we all get to the starting line as fairly as possible so that we can live lives freely for the sake of others. And faith and family and community first, something that we celebrate on the day of the Birnnaversary, kind of reminds us of that. So, today, I also just want to say, the faith and family traditions, they matter because they do remind us again every year. And when these things come up, they remind us to put even this government stuff that we deal with and all the issues that we talk about on this program. They're important, but they're penultimately important. We only fight these battles for the sake of the greater opportunities. Like we like to say here, we want to teach you how to use your temporal liberties for the sake of the eternal liberties of Christ, for the sake of building families of faith, for the sake of building congregations that proclaim the good news of the gospel freely. That's why we want to know how to do that stuff. Now, if they ever take away all those freedoms from us, we're not going to stop preaching and teaching the good news of the gospel. There'll just be more of a price to pay for that. But today, I just think one of the ways that we keep our wits about us and we keep these things properly in balance is to learn how to celebrate the things that really are important. So not just things like anniversaries, but what the anniversary means. The commitment to someone that's more than a commitment to yourself, the joy of raising children together rather than just having a bit of fun in one's relationship. So many people today want to get married, don't even want to have families anymore. And again, you're like, well, don't you have some responsibility to society too? Don't you have responsibility to the family that birthed you? It's just crazy how we've lost some of the basic fundamental things. But when we celebrate these things like anniversaries, we celebrate the challenge and the opportunity to grow by learning to love another person each and every day the way they need to be loved by God through you. And that's a whole different way than just bumping along in life and finding a bit of happiness along the way with whoever comes into your life. And then, one of the things, again, when you're celebrating, you begin to finally realize that this is all part of God's grand plan to illustrate his love for you. In fact, the Bible teaches that marriage is kind of it's a framework of how God loves you. Christ is the head of the church, which is his bride. And it talks about how Christ sacrifices for his church and how the bride, the church loves its Savior. And that's supposed to be a model, a reflection, if you will, of the beauty of the love between a man and a woman and a child. And so as you see all this as part of God's plan to illustrate his love for you, as you learn to love that other person or extend your family the way that God in Christ extends his love to you for them. So, again, faith, family, traditions. And so that's one of the reasons why these things are really important to celebrate. Celebrate birthdays, celebrate anniversaries, celebrate the holy days in your life, celebrate the seasons of the church year, where you start to see that God's timing is a lot different than the world's timing, and which one finally matters in the end. All this stuff is important. And on a day like this, for me today, it reminds me that even though our work in DC is important, it's supposed to be important as it serves the things that are most important in our life, our faith and our family and our community, which is something that we build, if you will, or we serve freely in Christ for others. So today I'm thankful for the Birnnaversary. It reminds me of the time when my life expanded in its opportunities and its experiences, as it expanded in my commitments, and it became fuller because of it. And family meant carrying on the traditions of faith from my family before to my family today. So each year, the traditions, the holidays, the holy days, the Birnnaversary days remind us that there are some things that have eternal purpose and value, and some things that don't. And that's why we must learn how to differentiate those things. Remember, we talk about dynamic differentiation. They're both important, but one's penultimately important and one's always in service to the other. So we put our temporal things to work in service to the eternal things that really matter in life. And so that's why we try to help you here at the LCRL. And today I'm going to have to leave it at that, because there is something more important that is calling my name today. It's the Birnnaversary. So thanks for the emails. Keep sharing, keep praying. And until we see him face to face, speak the truth in love with humility and grace. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Until next time, God richly bless you. I'm Gregory Seltz. Have a great day.